What would happen if we fell into a black hole? Chapter 1. The Horizon. The first mistake we made was thinking a black hole is a destination. It is not a place in any sense your hands or feet would recognize. It is a promise made by geometry, an oath kept by gravity. And yet, for the sake of the story and because I have always believed that the longest journeys are the ones we take with our minds, let us pretend there is a ship, and it is ours, and its nose is pointed toward a darkness like ink poured into the shape of a star. The mouth of the thing is quiet at first, almost well-mannered, as if the cosmos itself were holding a finger to its lips. We are skimming the outskirts of a galaxy, and the black hole, a supermassive one, the kind that anchors galactic hearts, is a deep absence around which the rest of reality is tidally arranged. It is hard to see something that refuses to be seen, so the light around it does the kind thing and traces the outline. A ring of hot gas, a lasso of pale blue fire called an accretion disk, clatters around the dark center at nearly the speed of light. Where matter falls inward and friction sets every particle screaming, the gas becomes a lantern. The lantern outlines a mouth that light itself cannot escape. You and I strap in. The ship murmurs under our palms. Our destination is the event horizon, the point of no return. But that phrase, point of no return, will only make sense to those who stay behind. For us, there will be nothing so dramatic as a line. There will be no gong sounded, no shutter slamming. Nothing explodes. The universe does not bark, "Go," when a long race begins. We start far enough out that the black hole is a curiosity, not a threat. A perfectly circular absence nested like a pearl in its halo of light. The guidance computers whisper to the engine bells. The hull quivers. You glance at me, a smile, thin around the eyes. This is the last sunrise we will see as a sunrise. Ahead is a different vocabulary. The ship's cameras swing to a bright star over our left shoulder. Watch that star closely, I tell you. It will teach you impatience, and then it will teach you patience again. As we accelerate, the starlight shifts toward the blue. Space itself is the medium we are moving through, so the waves of light bunch up in front of us, stretch out behind. Later, as we near the hole, the star's light will curve not because the star moved, but because paths themselves bend. Near any strong gravitational field, straight lines prefer to be circles. Still, there is time. There is always time out here, where distances are measured in the patience of light years. You learn to speak in hours like a monk. We spend them in the language of preparation, align instruments, calibrate gyros, run the checklists until they become call and response. We talk through the science as if it were a spell we need to recite. A black hole is not a thing, we remind ourselves. It is a solution. Write Einstein's equations on a page and ask them, softly, what space does when mass is very compact and the numbers grow wild. The equations reply, it does this. It lets space become a funnel. It creates a surface. Mathematicians call it a null surface, through which a future becomes a narrow corridor, every corridor narrowing until they meet at a point. We call that point the singularity, not because we understand it, but because it accepts no rivals. It is a place where our laws stumble and need new breath. We pass the orbit of the photon sphere, where light that has strayed too close becomes a moth trapped in perpetual chase. At 1.5 times the radius of the event horizon, you can, in principle, ride a beam of light and circle the black hole forever, a prison made from pure path. Outside our viewports, the heavens smear into arcs, constellations. We learned as children, Orion, the Southern Cross, are dragged and broken. The laser-straight promise between star and eye is bent into a question mark. As we approach, the accretion disk thickens into the geometry of flame. If we were reckless, if we dipped our wings, these gases would peel our ship like an apple, stripping anything that presumes to be solid. But we have come on the safer corridor, perpendicular to the disk, down the polar throat, where matter thins out and the black hole's jets sometimes scream out like needles of radio light. We have timed the approach for a quiet patch between belches. The universe is explosive, but it is not continuously so. Even monsters sleep. Time dilation, you say, as if tasting the words. It begins. It began long before we noticed. Time near the black hole moves differently, not because time is a fluid and the hole stirs it, but because time and space are not two different countries. They are districts in the same city, and here the streets weave tighter. For us, inside the ship, a minute is a minute. Our watch keeps its rhythm. Our hearts obey the metronome of our lives. But for anyone watching us from a safe distance, some patient astronomer, perhaps, peering through a telescope light years away, our movements appear to slow. Our radio calls lag. In their eyes, we will never quite fall in. We will become a redder and redder ghost as our light is stretched, a soft, fading ember smearing around the black mouth, circling slower, dimmer, until we disappear into the noise of the universe. The horizon is a conversation that cannot be finished with those who wait outside. For us, though, there is no drama at the crossing. The instruments sing their numbers. The ship's hull creaks as if remembering old storms. The horizon has no texture, no color, no temperature. You could paint it on your wall and not notice. We cross it because our future light cones all the directions our future could spread now tilt inward in obedience to the whole. If we fired our engines with the fury of 1,000 suns, our exhaust would flower backward into our faces. Our paths forward all end deeper within. Choice narrows as a funnel narrows. That is what point of no return truly means. Not the existence of a line, but the collapse of options. The first bite of the black hole is not heat. It is not darkness. It is a lesson in tides. Imagine standing on a cliff near the sea. The moon pulls a little harder on the water at your feet than it does on the water behind your head. And the ocean swells. Gravity is not a single yank. It is a gradient across your length. Here, the gradient is a saw. If we were falling into a small black hole, say, one made from a collapsed star, the difference in gravity between your feet and your head would become murderous before you ever reached the horizon. Your body would be spooled into a thread, stretched into spaghetti, molecules slipping their handholds on one another, atoms coaxed apart by insistence. This is the infamous spaghettification, as if the universe, after all its elegant mathematics, could not resist a culinary joke. But we chose a supermassive black hole. Its heart is the same idea, only scaled up. The gradient at the horizon is gentle, almost polite. You could cross it in comfort. The tidal difference across your body would be less than the pull of an elevator starting up under your feet. You would be fine. You might even think, for an hour, that those old physicists had over-dramatized everything. For a brief and dangerous period, you could be forgiven for believing this is survivable. We float in the black. Not perfect black, the accretion disk still smolders behind us, lensed into a ring that is not a ring, doubled by curved paths of light that went left to go right and right to go left. The universe is now predominantly behind us, not in space, but in causality. Whatever messages we send outward will spend their last energy climbing back up the funnel, weaker and redder, until their voices crack and vanish. You could shout to the stars with a 1-billion-watt transmitter, and the stars would hear an elderly whisper if they heard anything at all. Inside the event horizon, distances are not what you think they are. The mathematicians say that in here, the radial coordinate, the number that usually tells you how far you are from the center, behaves like time. You cannot choose to be at a different radius any more than you can choose to be at a different Tuesday. The singularity is not a place in space so much as a date on your calendar, one you are rushing toward without breaks. The walls do not close in. Time closes in. We unbuckle. It feels like a betrayal, but the ship's chairs groan with relief. There is no up or down. There is only inward. Our faces glow with the reflections of traceries of light that have been walking the long way around, light that set out long before our species learned to yearn, now making a final appearance in our small cabin. The sensors paint a portrait of a world that cannot be looked at directly. Magnetic fields tangled like yarn, occasional blue sparks where particles collide at nearly light speed, a hush where even virtual particles, the ghostly pairs that bubble everywhere, are tugged into a strange dance. Hawking radiation, that famous whisper of thermal light, is negligible here. The whole is so large, it is colder than the cosmic background. We cannot cook our dinner on the end of the universe. You ask, quietly, what happens to us now? And I say, the science branches. There are several stories the equations allow at the edge of what we know, and our ship is a bookmark sliding toward the last page. The oldest, simplest story says that we continue to fall, the tides strengthen. The difference in pull between our feet and our skull grows like a moral failing. Our bones become a confession. Our atoms forget their marriages. We are unwound into fundamental threads, and these threads have their own endings. The singularity is an end as complete as a period. Another story whispers of something stranger. Some physicists imagine firewalls, blazing curtains of high-energy quanta at the horizon that burn away information to protect the bookkeeping of the universe. If that is true, we would already be ash. But the version of the universe that feels most consistent under our palms, the version woven into the smoothness of the cabin and the slow turn of our heads, does not seem to allow such drama here. No scorch, no rupture. The horizon was soft. If a firewall waits, it is deeper, differently named, or never to be. And then there are the romantic stories, the ones about tunnels and bridges, Einstein-Rosen bridges, wormholes pinched like hourglasses, white holes on the other end that spit matter back out as if the universe were coughing politely into a handkerchief. These are mathematical daydreams with thorns. They require violations of the energy conditions as we understand them, or exotic matter that no one has yet seen. They are not impossible in the way a square circle is impossible. They are improbable in the way a roomful of shuffled cards, spontaneously arranging themselves by suit and rank, is improbable. But let us be honest, improbable adventures have been the heartbeat of our species. We push closer. We have to. This is not a voyage spectators make. Our ship's inertial meters purr. The hull ticks as if cooling after an oven, though we are nowhere near flame. The ticking is our fear using a familiar language. An odd mercy. Inside the horizon, you can no longer orbit. Circles are gone. Every path is inward, and so the dizzying sense of falling around, something the orbital vertigo, is replaced by a quiet surety. The math takes your hand. This will be brief. In a supermassive black hole, you can have minutes, hours, sometimes a day of shipboard time before the final crush. Not enough to grow old, enough to speak, to remember, to forgive. I ask you to look out one last time. Not because the view will change, the ring light behind us will grow thinner and more distorted, but it will not confess anything new, but because you and I are the kind of creatures who need to look, who award meaning by sight. The cabin glass is not really glass. It is a layered sandwich of field projectors and hardened alloys, and yet your breath still fogs it as if this were a winter morning and not the silence between laws. Will it hurt, you ask? Yes, I say, because truth belongs to us too, but not as you imagine. There will be no flame, no crushing hand, just a pull that outweighs all other pulls until you and I are no longer a you and I. Then, in a way that outrages grammar, we will be here and not here, because what we were will no longer exist to measure the moment. You nod. It is a strange comfort to be told that pain is a word that might not fit the last sentence. Pain is a map the brain makes in order to save itself next time. There is no next time. The cabin clock glows. We do not tell each other the numbers. They are not secret. They are simply a language for another species. Instead, we talk like sailors on the third night of a storm, of home, of favorite soups, of the green smell that comes before a tropical rain, of the laughter that surprised us at a funeral, of the first book that made us feel we were listening to our own thoughts spoken back. We talk of gravity as if it were a person we've loved in a complicated way, too much when it anchored us to a bed, not enough when it took our grandmother on the stairs. We talk until speaking feels like badly juggling too many objects in a small room. The accelerometers rise. It is barely perceptible at first, then undeniable. The gentle stretch that lengthens the bones in your forearms, the way the straps around our shoulders tug as if some patient giant were testing the seams. This is the same lesson the moon taught the oceans, just enacted with the seriousness of a final exam. The black hole does not hate us. It does not prefer us. It does what geometry requires of it. Tell me what happens after, you say softly, urgently, like someone asking about a city they might never visit but want to believe exists. I can tell you the physics. I can tell you that in many coordinate systems, our story ends in a finite proper time, our atoms torn loose by tides that climb beyond nuclear strength. I can tell you that information, the precise arrangement of what we once were, becomes the subject of a long argument between quantum mechanics and general relativity, a courtroom drama with no judge, only lawyers who refuse to stop talking. I can tell you that those who watch from afar will never see the ending. To them, we freeze and redden and fade, lies painted by light that had to spend everything to climb out. Our end is, for distant eyes, an asymptote, approached, never touched. But after is not the same as observed by them. After is a word like horizon, which changes its meaning inside the whole. For us, after is guaranteed, not in distance but in inevitability. It is closer the way Tuesday is closer when Monday has already become a story. We will go where all paths go here. The singularity is a place that becomes a time, that becomes a boundary to thought. The science is careful. It does not offer comfort. It refuses to say what a singularity feels like. It refuses to certify which of the speculative bridges are engineering projects waiting for a better budget and which are myths we tell ourselves because endings frighten us. The science does something better than comfort, though. It refuses to lie, and then it gives us a canvas so large we can write courage on it. The ship complains again, a long, low sound somewhere between a wail and a rain gutter. The gauges keep their courage, their little jittering needles refusing to behave as if anything is unusual. We are a handful of numbers dwindling toward fewer numbers. We are, in this moment, as honest as anything that has ever existed. We lean toward each other. If this were a ritual, we would say that we speak our names to each other so they are remembered. But this is not that kind of drama. We do not ask the universe to remember us. We ask only to know what it does to all things when they are done being themselves. We let go of the armrests. Our fingers find each other the way planets find stars, not through magic, but through the simplest mathematics dressed as fate. What would happen if we fell into a black hole? This, we fall. We learn that a horizon is not an edge but a grammar. We learn that time can be a place. We learn that the universe is more willing to be precise than we are willing to be consoled. We learn that falling is not a failure when geometry removes every other verb. Sooner than a story can honor, the gentle gradient will become less gentle. The pull will not triple. It will outpace tripling, climb like an exponential hymn. We will learn spaghettification not as a diagram from a lecture, but as a new word for what our bodies were always capable of becoming when stretched into their own atoms, then past them. The singularity will be not a point to hit, but a final rule to obey. And yet, because we are who we are, we will look for a different ending. We will look for a door that math says is welded shut. We will listen for rumors of passages and bridges, and somewhere, in the civility of equations, in the smoothness of the metric, we will find a small, conditional note. If this, if that, if matter behaves in a way we have never seen. If, we do not live in the if. We have built our ship upon the certain. Still, I will grant us this. A placeholder for hope, that is what the next chapter is for. Theories will blacken our hands. Paradoxes will scratch the chalkboard. We will consider how information, identity, and the broader cosmos negotiate with a whole that eats everything it touches and yet is made from the same laws that made your first laugh. For now, feel the straps tighten. Feel the length of your spine as a column that is learning a new alphabet. Feel the last of the universe's light curve around into our cabin like a gift that took the long way home. We are in the simplest part of the answer. The part statistics can't explain. The part diagrams in textbooks hold their breath over. We are falling. We are not yet finished. Chapter 2. The aftermath of falling. There is a peculiar kind of clarity that arrives when everything extraneous is stripped away, and what remains is the unavoidable. The straps dig a little more, the needles creep, the ring of light behind us thins to a filament, then to a glimmer braided with itself as lensing folds the sky like origami. You breathe, and the breath is your whole world. What would happen if we fell into a black hole? You have felt some of the answer in your bones already, but stories like this are layered, like sedimentary rock. Beneath the visible layer's horizon, dark, tide, there are beds of argument, bands of speculation, fossils of older ideas pressed flat, but not gone. If we are honest travelers, we should hold a lamp to the strata and read them before our light is spent. The first band is the old, clean geometry, the Schwarzschild black hole, non-rotating, alone, a perfect sphere not because it is round like a pearl, but because the contours of its gravitational field obey a symmetry so stark it becomes a poem. In this ideal, the inside is monotone. All roads end at the center. Proper time, that unarguable wristwatch strapped to your life, ticks from horizon crossing to singularity in a finite, heartbreakingly short interval. In such a world, we are not special. We are not spared. You and I would become longer than we are wide, then longer still, until width, as a concept, forgets to be sensible. The stretch would pick at our ligaments first, a violinist gently tightening pegs, then at the ladders inside our cells, then at the tighter ladders inside atoms where quarks gossip through gluons and refuse to let go. Eventually, even that refusal would become a negotiation held at knife point. In this telling, the singularity is a full stop, not a comma. But the universe rarely honors clean geometry. Real black holes spin. Real black holes drink. They are Kerr black holes rotating, oblate, threaded with a ring singularity and gift-wrapped with two horizons, outer and inner. Rotation adds texture to fate. If our target is a spinner, then inside the outer horizon there is a second threshold, the Cauchy horizon, a place where cause and effect become suspicious, where the math warns of unpredictability blooming like mold. Between those horizons, space and time trade masks more than once. There are directions you cannot help but move in, like clock hands that will not be stilled, and directions you may still influence, a little like a canoeist angling for a friendlier current, even as the river insists on downstream. Rotation also carves out an ergosphere outside the outer horizon, a region where space-time is dragged azimuthally, frame-dragging, the exquisite phrase so insistently that standing still becomes more impossible than hovering above a bonfire. If we had approached off-axis, we could have tried a Penrose process, boiling energy out of that whirl the way a clever engineer steals efficiency from turbulence. But we came down the polar throat, where the jets sometimes roar and the drag is milder. Efficiency is a word for those who intend to return with a ledger. We did not. Past the Cauchy horizon, if miraculously our ship and minds are not shredded by the infinite blue shift of light that has been falling in with us from the beginning of the universe. If, miraculously, turbulence in the metric does not magnify to disaster. If, miraculously, we still remember our names and the map becomes stranger. Kerr interiors are full of maybes, wormhole branches and other universes implied in diagrams, the way detours are implied by dotted lines. But those dotted lines come with footnotes, and the footnotes are stern. They say quantum fields may riot here, instabilities may bloom. An inner horizon may not be a hallway. It may be a wall of light that has been saving up energy for eons to spend it all on the first visitor. If physics is a courtroom, this part of the building is under renovation, and the scaffolding hides as much as it protects. You look at me, and in the look is the plea for a single answer, not a hedge of possibilities bristling like a thorn bush. I owe you that. The single answer is this: for us, as we are, in any plausible black hole in our galaxy, we die. We do not unwrap that word with euphemism. The end is an inwards-only procession that culminates in the dissolution of structure. There is no horizon-crossing rescue by alien hands in a waiting skiff, No tubular bridge of negative energy whisking us to Andromeda, no white hole coughing us into a young universe where we arrive as myths. The narrow corridor narrows until it is no corridor at all. And yet, we die is a truth with many rooms. In one room lives pain. We have met it elsewhere. Here, as the stretch accelerates and the pressure gradient across a rib cage becomes a discourse the rib cage cannot keep up with, pain begins as a competent warning. But pain is a signal with purpose. And in a circumstance where purpose fails, the signal does too. Consciousness is not a candle that burns at a uniform rate. It flickers in winds and can gutter in pressure. There is a mercy here the diagrams forget to mention. The body does not have clocks for this. The instruments in our ship will keep writing numbers until they are thin scratches. Our brains will not. The end may be quicker than our dread has budgeted for. In another room lives the matter of what becomes of what we were. Not the proteins, not the long, shy confessions in phone notes, but the arrangement information in the sober, technical sense. If we burned a book, we were taught, the words would be scrambled into smoke and ash and heat. But if we had infinite patience and paid attention to every escaping particle, in principle we could reconstruct the book. Unitary evolution, the proud vow of quantum mechanics. A black hole seems to threaten this vow. Matter falls in, the horizon makes a promise to silence. Then much later, Hawking radiation thermal, bland, indifferent leaks out, and the whole evaporates. Where are the words? This is the information paradox. And although we are far beyond the debates of offices and chalkboards and white-haired colloquia, it still matters. If the laws that wrote our story are inconsistent, the last page cannot be trusted. The current best poems about this problem are daring and economical. One says, the information is not lost. It is stored on, or in subtle correlations across the horizon itself, a hologram in the literal sense, where the three-dimensional interior is encoded on a two-dimensional skin. The black hole is a thermodynamic object with entropy proportional to its surface area, not its volume. The bits that describe everything that fell in are written where no eye can read but where a patient future can, through Hawking's slow trickle and the entanglement of quanta, eventually decode. Another poem says, space-time itself in quantum gravity is emergent from entanglement patterns, and the interior we feel is a way of talking about those patterns. Our fall is real as a subjective experience, but globally, the book of the universe remains unitary. You narrow your eyes. So which is it? Did we go in or did we smear on the outside as a pattern of bits? Complementarity, the diplomats of physics reply. For the outside observer, we are red ghosts smeared thin at the horizon, our details encoded there in ways too fine for any current hand to touch. For us, the horizon is uneventful. We go in, our wristwatches yawn, our atoms negotiate, and then capitulate. Both descriptions are consistent, they say, because no single observer can compare notes across the two vistas. No contradiction can be cached. There is, in that answer, a whiff of finesse so fine it resembles evasion, but it is also power. It keeps faith with what experiments have screamed at us for a century, that reality is generous enough to be many things at once, as long as no one asks it to tell two contradictory stories to the same listener. Then, like a rumor in a crowded room, came the firewall. It was a stern reminder that entanglement cannot be effortlessly promised to too many partners at once. If late-time Hawking quanta are entangled with early-time radiation in order to bleed information back out, they cannot also be entangled with modes just behind the horizon to guarantee a smooth crossing. Monogamy of entanglement acts like a jealous friend. To spare unitarity, the story goes, the horizon must roar a raging curtain of quanta that incinerates us the moment we touch it. No smooth falling, no gentle gradient. Just a final act as theatrical as a myth. Do we feel fire? No. The crossing was quiet. Does that rule the firewall out? Not with courtroom certainty. Perhaps the firewall lives in a quantum regime our classical, macroscopic ship could not sample. Or perhaps it only arises at very late stages when the whole has evaporated to a size too small to threaten anyone but thought experiments. But I tell you the truth we can hold. In any black hole large enough to feed on a galaxy's patience, the horizon is as soft to us as drifting snow. Whatever accounting trick protects unitarity, it does not bill our skin first. And what of Hawking's whisper? Here, inside a supermassive hole, the Hawking temperature is so near to absolute zero that the whisper is colder than the night between galaxies. The radiation matters on timescales vaster than language. It is not a warmth we will feel as anything but poetry. Yet its existence is one of the great dangers we pose to our own ignorance. A tiny, relentless tick obliging our grandest objects to age. The horizon is not only a promise, it is a ledger. We have talked a long while. The cabin has narrowed to the size of our sentences. It is time to count the last practicalities, the ones that fiction usually hand waves in a hurry and that reality writes with underlines. First, navigation. Outside, a probe could orbit a black hole. Inside, we cannot. Our thrusters do not aim us at a different radius any more than willpower aims a clock hand at a different hour. But we are not stone. We can still choose lateral gestures. In a rotating hole, aim your momentum to catch a tailwind from frame dragging, and the local experience of falling may be less jagged or more, depending on your choices. It is like adjusting your descent on a long, dark escalator by walking to the left rail or the right. It is not escape, it is taste. Second, light. Photons that fall with us are blue-shifted, energy densities rise. Background radiation, relic neutrinos from the young universe, even the faintest spill of the accretion disk from behind, all of it is sharpened, all of it intensified, all of it conspires to produce a hostile bath. For a while, the interior of a supermassive hole is friendlier to macroscopic structures than the interior of a stellar mass hole. Then the bath grows less friendly, then the tides speak in a register that ends debates. Third, memory. There is an argument that says memory cannot survive here because memory is pattern, and pattern requires stability across time. And here, time is a slope that steepens until everything slides. But in the minutes we have, memory is precisely what we own. We can summon a jasmine-scented night market at the edge of a river where fishmongers laugh and lanterns paint the water, and we can eat mango-sticky rice with plastic spoons under a thunderhead that has not yet decided to arrive. We can hold the voice of someone who called our name as if it were a rope thrown to a swimmer. We can recall the first time a teacher wrote E equals rho divided by epsilon 0, and we realize the universe agreed to be simple in certain dialects. Memory is a candle that does not in fact fight the dark. It teaches the eye to love the wick. There is a temptation, at this point, to invent a door, to draw a clean circle on the chalkboard labeled quantum gravity and say we walk through it. String theorists, loop quantum gravitationists, asymptotic safety devotees, emergent space-time poets all have sketched possibilities where singularities are tamed, smoothed, replaced by bounces or bridges or finite curvatures that blush but do not scream. Good. We will need them. Our species will not be content with ignorance forever, but intellectually honest hope does not demand a promise to the doomed. It demands that, when we have not solved a problem, we say so. And then we keep working as if the next mind to try might be the one that finds the hinge. I will not lie to you. For us, no hinge arrives. The accelerometers climb a little more. The numbers the ship reports begin to lose their interpretability. They report stress in units we do not use for bones. A thin, iridescent line shivers across your vision, not an atmospheric mirage, but neurons misfiring as extracellular electrolytes shift in a field they did not evolve to meet. I take your hand, not because hands can anchor anything here, but because hands were the first tools our ancestors loved, and remembering that love feels like telling the truth on the last page. If one were to print this next moment on a page, the ink would thicken and fill the white until the letters were swallowed. That is what a singularity is to the language we know. It is not a threat. It is an admission. Before that ink spreads, let us lift our eyes once more not to the ring of light, now a delicate embroidery, more imagined than seen, but to the idea of why we came. Why does the question, what would happen if we fell into a black hole, pull at us so fiercely it can drag a life's curiosity behind it? Not because we are morbid, not because we are reckless, because we are creatures of edges. We walk coasts and ridges and city limits, and we ask what happens beyond. Sometimes the answer is a view, sometimes it is a fall. The asking is not a guarantee of safe return. It is an act of citizenship in a universe that is not obligated to be kind, but is unfailingly, staggeringly honest. So here is the most honest ending I can give. The black hole is not a monster. It is the consequence of gravity unchaperoned by pressure. It is space-time doing what the equations signed it up to do when matter is piled stubbornly and coolly enough. It is a foundry where stars are recycled, where nuclei are unwoven, where entropy gets its say. It is also a mirror that shows us the outlines of our ignorance in high relief. Falling in taught us what horizons are, in physics and in life. Not walls, but changes in what questions make sense to ask. Outside, you can ask, can we turn around? Inside, you can ask, how do we spend the time that remains? We answered both, for the ones who watch us from far away, and there will always be watchers, because our species is part moth, part lighthouse keeper. Our fall is an unfinished sentence. Their telescopes will show us freezing at the edge, reddening, dimming, a curve that approaches the horizon and never quite meets it. They will argue in faculty lounges and in comment threads and around desert campfires about whether information is lost. They will write measures of entropy on napkins. They will doodle Penrose diagrams in the corners of meeting agendas. They will tell undergraduates that, no, really, this is what it means to take general relativity personally. They will be right to argue. They will be right to keep looking. Their unfinished sentence will become the start of others. For us, the sentence ends, not with a scream. Our throats are no longer a meaningful interface to reality. not with a revelation other than the one we have been reciting, that the world is consistent even when it is not consoling. It ends with a long breath that cannot finish, a strap that no longer bites, because a strap requires a shoulder, and a shoulder requires a body, and a body, here, is a verb that has been persuaded to retire. If you wanted a brighter ending, I will give you this. Everything we were was written in the language of the universe. That language does not shred pages and call it done. It scatters words and letters and phonemes into fields and particles and correlations that remain accountable to the book. The book call it space-time. Call it the wave function of the universe. Call it the pattern that persists, keeps its promises. You and I were patterns that learned to name themselves. Those patterns are redistributed. The lesson of the black hole is that nothing is so special it is exempt from redistribution. The other lesson is that nothing is so humble it does not participate in the whole. On one of our earlier nights, in a quiet, safe orbit far from here, we watched a meteor shower through the ship's forward window. You said it looked like punctuation, all those fast commas and dashes and semicolons cutting bright grammar into the dark. I told you I wanted our work to be a colon, a little pause, a promise that what comes next will elaborate. Falling into a black hole is not the colon we hoped for. It is a period. But periods have dignity. They tell the reader that the sentence was complete, even if they did not like where it went. The instruments give us one last courteous lie, the kind that machines tell because we built them to believe we would always want numbers. Then even the lie is too much to maintain. Somewhere outside, meaning beyond any event that can touch our future, jets lance from the poles, lighting interstellar gas blue-white. Somewhere outside, tidal forces shred a star that strayed incautiously close, and its remains brighten a galaxy's heart in a flare that makes astronomers whisper and type. Somewhere outside, someone asks the question we asked, and two people who love each other argue about whether one of them would ever be so foolish as to try. Somewhere outside, a child falls asleep with a library book splayed on their chest, unafraid, because for now the night is big and kind and full of stories. Inside, here, us. A narrowing, then no us. Then no here that can be shared. Then this is not an ellipsis for mystery. It is the mathematical honesty of an undefined expression, nothing the words on this page can represent. What would happen if we fell into a black hole? We did. We learned more than we hoped and less than we wanted. We crossed a horizon that was a grammar. We moved through a time that was a place. We accepted that endings are not mistakes but features, and we let the universe do what it has always done. Keep its books balanced, keep its laws simple, keep its doors locked where they must be and ajar where they can be. We were brave enough to ask and careful enough to listen. In the end, the answer was not cruel. It was precise. There is a last human thing to do, even as language fails and mathematics takes off its gloves. Gratitude. For the ship, for the questions, for the company. You squeeze my hand, I squeeze back. The gesture does not change any tensor. It changes the story, which is all a gesture ever needs to do. Now the page blackens, not with anger, with closure.